Hello, today is Saturday the 21st of July 2018 and this is my second entry into my journal all about CBT for emetophobia. So last week I talked about my first appointment and what I'd been through on there, and I gave a bit of a backstory about my own experience of emetophobia and what I've been through over the last 10 plus years. So today I wanted to talk about what happened in the second appointment that I had on Thursday and giving an update about where I'm up to with things so far. As always, I'll put a trigger warning here that if you also struggle with emetophobia, I will be using some terms and discussing topics that you might find uncomfortable. There won't be any footage or anything particularly graphic, but I will be talking about these things. If you struggle with that, you might want to bear it in mind, but I do encourage you to try and push through and watch the video if you can. The whole process of CBT is about understanding, acknowledging and facing your own fears, and that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about today, about the behaviours of avoiding things that make you uncomfortable. So last week was actually quite challenging. I had a few points that were really difficult for anyone with emetophobia. On the Saturday I went to a barbecue for a friend's birthday, which used to be something I'd really enjoy, I was always up for, but again, I think anyone with emetophobia will relate that barbecues are a bit of a trigger point because they kind of go hand in hand with food poisoning. I know a lot of people get that from barbecues. So I was quite cautious. I was vegetarian for the day and I had my own barbecue that I had set up separately so it wasn't, cross-contaminated. I had a bit of trouble getting it to light, it wasn't very good. We managed to make some burgers on it, some vegetarian burgers, and they were okay. Then later on we tried to do some sausages and it had run out, so we had to use the other barbecue but with a bit of foil so there was no contamination. And that didn't seem to work either, so we ended up having to fry the sausages afterwards. My girlfriend had the same, and she was fine with how they were, but I wanted to really make sure that they were properly cooked, even though it was all vegetarian. Just because again, I don't want to eat food that hasn't been cooked properly, so I'm very nervous about that. And I didn't have much of an appetite with it in the end. I think I'd got quite nervous about the fact that they'd come off the grill not very hot, and yeah, I didn't really feel comfortable eating that much. But I went home that night and I was fine and there was nothing really wrong. So after the barbecue, my girlfriend and all her friends had gone out, so they went out drinking, they had quite a lot to drink. She didn't actually go out in the end because she got a bit too drunk, and then she came round the next day, and as soon as she came in she just kind of said, I need to go to the bathroom. And I knew what that meant, and my bedroom is actually directly beneath the bathroom, so I hear everything that goes on in there. So I had to kind of sit in bed with my fingers in my ears trying to block out any noise while she was basically being sick. So that was unpleasant. She was very apologetic. She does understand what I'm going through and she knows what I'm like, so she, tried not to, but it happens. You live with people that get sick. You can't avoid it, regardless of whether it's because they're hungover or because they got food poisoning or anything else. You're gonna hear someone being sick at some point. But anyone with emetophobia knows that that's just the worst thing, and you just don't want it to happen at all. So I dealt with that and I was okay, it was fine. I was a bit nervous and a bit uncomfortable. Then Tuesday morning, from about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I just woke up feeling really sick. I don't know where it came from, I don't know what it was. I thought about the food that I'd had. Again, my girlfriend had had the same and she was fine, so there was no reason to assume it was food poisoning. But I felt really sick and I kind of couldn't really get back to sleep, and that carried on for most of the morning. Towards the evening I was still a bit off. I wasn't sick. I think again this was one of those situations where I probably should have been. I think anyone else probably would have just been sick to get it out of the way, but there's no way I was ever going to do that. Normally something like that would have kind of written off the rest of the day and I wouldn't have been able to get out, but actually later that evening I managed to convince myself to get up and go out to a networking event. I even had a bit of the food that I'd had the day before later on that evening as well, and it hadn't put me off ever touching it again. And I was fine. The networking event was fine. The food was fine. I felt fine on the next day, on Wednesday. In fact, I had a huge appetite all day and I kept eating. So things were good despite that day of feeling really sick. Everything afterwards was absolutely fine. And then Thursday, I actually had my appointment, and that's where we got to. So in that appointment, I told my therapist all about what had happened that week and all the kind of challenges that I'd faced and how difficult it had been. And, you know, she listened and she tried to look at what I'd been doing and how I'd been reacting to the things that I'd experienced. And it all kind of seemed to make sense, and it helped me kind of look at, again, at what I talked about last week, about what it was that I was really fearing, you know, what was my real fear. And I think it reinforced the idea that yes, there is a kind of social embarrassment fear there. There's definitely, you know, a desire to be away from people when I feel ill, that I want to be on my own and I want to have that space. But there's also definitely the fear of the physical sensations. So, you know, going back to that Tuesday morning when I felt really sick, there was no way that I would have ever let myself be sick, that if it was possible to stop it, I would, and I did, and I, you know, maintained that the whole day. So yeah, you know, it's definitely a physical thing. It's definitely a case of I don't want to face that experience. So that was kind of confirming everything that we'd gone over last week, and we talked a little bit more about, you know, what I experience when I go through that and what goes through my mind. And then we started to look at behaviours. So this, I guess, is kind of the second part of gaining more of an understanding of what this fear is and what it does to you and what it does to my behaviours. So we started this is my plan, and it's all about the fear of being sick and all of the things that happen around that actually reinforce that behaviour. So it's things that I do because of the fear, but in themselves they actually reinforce that idea in my head that there is something to be scared of. So, for example, the first thing is actually talking about or thinking about the physical sensation of being sick. You know, the thoughts of, you know, the sounds, the feeling, you know, all these things that are really horrible. I can't really talk about them anyway, just as it is. They make me uncomfortable. But you know, I push those thoughts away, and you know, whenever I'm feeling sick and I start to think about it, I immediately start telling my brain, no, you can't go through that. You can't think about that. Think about something else. It's not going to happen. You're not going to be sick. You know, try and think of it in a different way. So all of these little things, you know, they start to have that effect. So, I mean, what else have we got on here? So I have a fear of being trapped, a fear of being in any situation that I can't get out of. And again, that's because I believe somehow that if I'm trapped, I can't get out in case I need to be sick, because I somehow assume that I'm going to be sick all the time. And in general, I avoid going out to busy places or anywhere where there's lots of people. And I think, you know, that's because it makes me feel like I can't get out or get away. Another one was things like restaurants. So, for example, going to a restaurant for food used to be fine. I never had a problem with it really, or there was a period where I didn't have a problem with it. But now it's the fact that you get there, someone else is preparing the food, which might make me a little bit nervous, but then I'll eat and it'll be fine. And, you know, I remind myself that lots of people eat at this restaurant and they're always fine. But then if, for example, while I'm eating I start to get anxious, then it suddenly feels like I'm surrounded by people, I can't really get away. If I want to leave, then I need to pay the bill, I need to ask for a waiter who's very busy running around. They'll come to me with the bill when they get the chance, and then I have to wait for them to come back again a few minutes later, and then we can pay. Or I might have to wait for someone else that I'm with. You know, if I go with my girlfriend, she might still be eating and she might not want to leave, but I might want to get out straight away. And just the fact that I'm then there and I can't get away makes me nervous, so I avoid going to restaurants. And because I avoid going to restaurants, whenever I do, that reinforces that fear. What else have I got? I don't want to be around anyone else when they're ill. I don't necessarily trust other people preparing my food, and in fact I'm very careful when I do prepare my own food. I'll always make sure that everything is extremely clean, that I can't, just, have to make sure that it's really, really well cooked, that, nothing is left to chance, which they're not terrible behaviours, they're all very normal things to do, but I think I push them to a kind of extended level where it doesn't need to be as thorough as it actually is. And then we try to look at things, less about the things that I avoid and more about the things that I actually do because of the fear. So some things that I do, for example, I'll always carry a bottle of water with me wherever I go. I've got like a nice flask that I use all the time, and I always take that pretty much anywhere. Anytime I leave the house, it comes with me. And I think that's because I see it as a bit of a comfort thing, that sometimes when you get scared, your mouth will go dry, and it's good to have something to, to keep you hydrated. And B, it somehow reinforces in my mind that if I'm drinking and I'm swallowing, then it's keeping my whole digestive system from trying to go backwards. That kind of reinforces that I'm okay. If I can keep drinking water, then I'm okay. I know that that's nonsense. I know that that won't stop you if you're going to be sick, but that just is in my head. And again, I don't think it's a bad thing to carry water around with you. I think it's good to make sure that you're drinking lots of water anyway. So that's not necessarily something I'm going to stop either way. But I think there's definitely a case where I'm convincing myself that I'm doing it because it's good to have water with me, when really it's a comfort thing and it's a safety thing. The other thing as well is things like carrying a plastic bag. So that was a more recent thing, that whenever I was leaving the house, I would carry a plastic bag with me, especially if I was going somewhere where I wouldn't be able to leave and find somewhere to be sick if I needed to be sick, So if I'm going to somewhere that has toilets, it's not necessarily a problem. But I'd still take it with me anyway, just in case. And again, I might try and tell myself, oh, I take it in case I need to go shopping or something. But I know for a fact that I'm taking it because I think that it's something there for me in case I need to be sick and I don't want to be seen, or I don't want to make a mess or something. So I want to have it with me just in case, especially for something like being on a train or public transport. You're not always able to get off in time, and you don't want to do it on the bus. So that's my way of getting around that. So yeah, it was just about kind of recognizing those behaviors and those actions that I do, or the things that I avoid because of this fear, and also reminding myself that doing these actions are actually just reinforcing this idea that it's necessary, that there is something to be scared of, and that I need to be prepared for it. And by recognizing these, hopefully we can start to move towards reducing them at least, or trying to stop them completely, so that I can say I don't need to carry a plastic bag with me all the time. I don't need to have water with me everywhere I go. It's okay to go to restaurants, it's okay to be in busy places, and all of these things that somehow in my head over the years I've associated with being sick, and it's trying to create something that will stop me from doing that. So over the week I've got to kind of carry on filling this in and keep adding some more things to it, keep an eye out for the things that I do and the behaviours that I display, and trying to kind of rethink them in my head and just sort of start to get an idea of how this fear is integrated into my life and what it does to me. And I guess from there, the next step is to start to move away from those behaviours, experience going out without water, going out without plastic bags, experience going to places that I'm scared of, and trying to reinforce in my head that these things are okay, that there's nothing to be scared of. The other thing that we did in the session as well was thinking about some goals, where I want to be at the end of this therapy and what I want to achieve. So the first thing I was thinking was that I want to be able to disassociate the things that I've connected. So I want to be able to not think about feeling sick whenever I go out. I want to get to a point where I don't fear that this is going to happen for no particular reason. Further down the line, there were things about being okay with the symptoms. So I feel nausea. I feel nausea very often. It's a very regular thing for me. And I want to be able to get to a point where I don't panic every time I feel a bit nauseous, and I don't get scared. And ultimately, being okay with the idea of being sick, that if I need to, if I do wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I feel really ill, that I can just get up, go and be sick, and realise that I'm okay afterwards. So those are some pretty big goals. Those are definitely quite far down the line. And for now, I think I'm just going to carry on thinking about my behaviours and the things that I do and trying to spot what I'm doing and how those things are reinforcing this fear, and hopefully move towards a point where I'm getting past those behaviours and starting to change the way that I live my life. And in doing so, reinforcing an idea that I don't necessarily need to be scared every day. So that's where I'm at the moment. That's pretty much a summary of this week. I've got another appointment on Thursday again, as always. So I will do another video when I've done that and I've got some things to say about it. I hope anyone else has found this helpful. So thanks for watching. That's pretty much everything I've got for now, but I'll be with you again next week. Thanks, bye.